1971 did not begin as a particularly successful year in the life of martial arts superstar Bruce Lee. Hollywood roles for Asian actors in the 1970s were few and far between, and his movie collaboration with James Coburn, who was at the time Bruce Lee's student, The Silent Flute, had been abruptly shelved by Warner Brothers. However, in June of that year, Bruce hit the beginning of a purple patch in his career. He filmed possibly the finest screen role of his career so far, as antique dealer Lee Chung in the pilot episode of the detective drama Longstreet. The episode was entitled The Way of the Intercepting Fist, the literal translation for Bruce Lee's own martial art of Jeet Kune Do. The script was a close collaboration between writer Sterling Silliphant and Bruce, and if viewed closely, is akin to watching Bruce giving a private kung fu lesson. James Franciscus portrays the blind detective Longstreet, who is taught martial arts by Bruce Lee's character. More than anything Bruce had previously filmed, this episode showcases his philosophy perfectly. During this period, Bruce was called at 4 a.m. by a Hong Kong radio announcer and interviewed live on air. In response to the disc jockey's question about making a film in Asia, Bruce blearily replied that he would if the price and scripts were right. The interview was heard by Shanghai-born movie executive Raymond Chow, at the time aged 45, and in business for 3 years. He dispatched one of his female producers, Liu Lianghua, to persuade Bruce to sign a 2-picture contract. Bruce would receive $10,000 on arrival in Hong Kong, and a further $5,000 on completion of a second movie. Bruce was initially skeptical. He decided to consult with James Coburn, who warned him, "TV wastes, genius. Follow Eastwood and Bronson. Make a movie abroad." Bruce Lee signed the contract on Monday, June the 28th, 1971, for an initial movie entitled King of Boxers. Production was due to commence on Monday, July 12, 1971. Thus, Bruce Lee flew to Thailand to make his first Chinese movie for over a decade. The movie was later retitled The Big Boss in Europe and Asia and Fists of Fury in North America. Producer Raymond Chow would have preferred Bruce to fly straight to Bangkok and avoid Hong Kong, where rival film mogul Run Run Shaw was vying for Bruce's signature. Bruce steadfastly refused Chow's offer, deliberately landing in Hong Kong to meet a friend prior to flying on to Thailand. He eventually flew on to Bangkok, from where he was driven to the movie location some 2 hours north in Pak Chong. Bruce was appalled by the conditions in Pak Chong's primitive location, situated on the fringe of a national park. Plagued by cockroaches and mosquitoes constantly, he was losing weight rapidly, falling to 128 pounds. He despaired at the lack of basic foodstuffs available, no beef and little chicken or pork. Instead, he ate canned meat as a supplement and luckily had arrived well equipped with vitamins. Shortly after Bruce's arrival in Pak Chong, a Taiwanese film producer rang him. He offered to buy out Raymond Chow's contract and to top the offer, as well as taking care of any lawsuit for breaking the agreement. Bruce, being a man of character, flatly refused. His lawyer Adrian Marshall later recalled, Bruce had a sixth sense about whom he could trust. Shaw Brothers executives also plagued the location with phone calls trying to poach Bruce away from a nervous Raymond Chow. Originally, Bruce had approached them in preference to Golden Harvest, but had asked for $20,000, unheard of at that time, and had been turned down by Run Run Shaw. Now, in light of the imminent success of the new venture with Golden Harvest, a rethink was in order, and Shaw Brothers were desperate to build bridges and renegotiate with Bruce, but to no avail. In The Big Boss, Bruce Lee plays Cheng Chao-an, a young man sent to live with relatives and work with them in the local ice factory. Cheng stumbles upon a cache of drugs hidden in the ice, resulting in his family being murdered in revenge. Throughout the first third of the movie, Cheng barely shakes a fist in anger, following a deathbed promise to his mother to stay out of trouble. Cheng wears a jade feng shui charm to remind him of the promise. However, once the locket is broken in two during a violent set piece at the ice factory, Cheng is free to wipe out the enemy. The Big Boss, curiously, also features Bruce in scenes of drunkenness and sexuality, not present in later roles. Indeed, his performance in The Big Boss displays a freshness and eagerness sadly tempered by outside pressures later in his career. Bruce also displays some of the most animalistic fighting performances of his career, laying opponents to waste with a fighting passion seldom seen before or since. The original Big Boss director, Jiajang Wu, was allegedly rough and ready in method. Liu Lianghua, who signed Bruce to the movie, called Raymond Chow to ask for Wu to be replaced by her husband, Lo Wei, a former Shanghai matinee idol turned director. Chow agreed after viewing rushes of the early footage, which appeared to place more emphasis on co-star James Tien than on new star Bruce Lee. He replaced the director with Lo Wei, though Bruce did not apparently hit it off with Lo, describing him in a letter to his wife Linda as a fame lover. The entire budget for the movie was less than $100,000, making it a high-ranking profit maker by any modern yardstick. Director Lo Wei allegedly stated he filmed The Big Boss from 3 pieces of paper. He claimed that Bruce disrupted filming pretending to lose his contact lens, part of Bruce's strategy to take control of his own fight scenes from the official fight director Han Ying Chai. It was an inauspicious start to the friendship. Lo Wei also later alleged that Bruce did not understand fighting for the camera and was just a street fighter, claiming to have educated Bruce in how to fight on the set of The Big Boss. This is unlikely, as Bruce had already had a crash course in screen fighting during his time on the set of The Green Hornet in the 60s. It is also generally acknowledged that Lo Wei was more interested in what was happening at the racetrack than the style of fighting on set. Bruce was later quoted by Linda as saying, "No way, Lo Wei," to a third collaboration following completion of the Big Boss Fist of Fury contract. Bruce had 2 sex scenes in the movie, but was unimpressed with the quality of his female co-stars and was relieved he only had to pretend to sleep with the actresses. Bruce recalled, "We used a real whorehouse and it really stank. The film company paid to keep the hookers out of our hair." During the Big Boss premiere in October of 1971, a bemused Linda, viewing the scenes in a Hong Kong cinema for the first time, was informed wryly by Bruce, "Fringe benefits." Bruce was approached by an extra during the filming, a Thai boxer who hoped to learn Jeet Kune Do. Bruce refused, but did later recall that it was enjoyable to compare moves with the boxer. Rumors later emerged that it was a real battle and that Bruce had been hurt, aggravating an old back injury. Bruce was dismayed that the production, after his steep learning curve in Hollywood, was very amateur. He regarded Lo Wei as unbearably pompous. Eventually, Bruce lost his voice through shouting above background noise in the humid conditions. He then hurt his back during a fight scene and sprained an ankle while performing a leap onto safety mattresses. This required a trip to Bangkok for treatment, where Bruce subsequently picked up a flu virus. Bruce was filmed waist-high for a couple of days, dragging the healing leg while he completed the movie. Towards the end of shooting in Pak Chong, Bruce finally met up with Raymond Chow in person and told him, "You wait, I'm going to be the biggest Chinese star in the world." Paramount executive Tom Tannenbaum was at this time trying to locate Bruce while on location in Pak Chong for negotiation of further Longstreet episodes, following a successful airing of the pilot. The show had generated a considerable amount of fan mail, most of it addressed to Bruce Lee. Suspiciously, Bruce did not receive the correspondence from Paramount regarding the Longstreet role and expressed concern about this in letters to Linda, feeling that his September 1971 return to the US may be too late for the studio deadline and for any of Sterling Silliphant's script rewrites. There was some speculation of Linda and Bruce's 2 children, Brandon and Shannon, then aged 6 and 2, joining Bruce in Pak Chong, though he would be expected to make a short film about his art of Jeet Kune Do in return for the airfares. In the event, this never materialized. On August the 17th, 1971, Bruce wrote to Linda. He remarked that he was beginning to feel overwhelmed by the speed at which his transitional career was moving. He was also enjoying the luxury of breakfast served in bed. He wrote a short note to the then 6-year-old Brandon saying, "Hello Brandon, when I come back we will go to the toy shop. Love you my son, Dad." Adding the PS, "Will you kiss Mama and Shannon for me?" At this time, Bruce was becoming increasingly concerned at the possible restructuring of the mortgage payments for his property in Bel Air. Though he could hardly realize it at the time, the success of The Big Boss would render his current financial worries irrelevant. Bruce told reporters at the time, "We knew from the outset that the film was going to be a success, but I have to admit we weren't really expecting it to be that successful." Bruce continued, "People like films that are more than just one long armed hassle. With any luck, I hope to make multi-level films here, the kind of movies where you can just watch the surface story if you like, or can look deeper into it. Most of the Chinese films to date have been very superficial and one-dimensional. I tried to change that with The Big Boss. The character I played was a very simple, straightforward guy. Like, if you told this guy something, he'd believe you. Then, when he finally figures out he's been had, he goes animal. This isn't a bad character, but I don't want to play him all the time. I prefer somebody with a little more depth." On September the 3rd, 1971, Bruce returned to Hong Kong from Thailand to host a press conference at Kai Tak Airport. From there, he returned to the United States to film further episodes of Longstreet for Paramount Television. Bruce appeared in 3 more episodes, Spell Legacy Like Death, I See, Said the Blind Man, and Wednesday's Child. Bruce was especially proud of a New York Times review which singled him out for special praise in his role as Lee Chung. In October 1971, he returned to Hong Kong with wife Linda and their 2 children for The Big Boss premiere. The city was in uproar. The Big Boss took $3.1 million in just 19 days, outstripping previous record holder The Sound of Music by over $1 million. The Lee family moved into a flat in Waterloo Hill, Hong Kong, and attended the midnight premiere of the movie. Bruce's life would never return to normal. From this point on, he was mobbed in Hong Kong wherever he went. The Big Boss is, sadly, the most incomplete of Bruce Lee's released movies. Many scenes which were filmed for the Mandarin version were inexplicably removed from the Cantonese dubs. One such scene features Bruce's only nude scene, filmed on location in a Pak Chong bordello. Another sees Bruce and co-star James Tien escaping the wrath of a group of gamblers who hurl a cart at them as they then leap onto a nearby barn wall. But perhaps the most infamous censored clip features Bruce burying a 16-inch saw blade into an opponent's skull. On the 7th of December 1971, Bruce received a telegram from Warner Brothers executive Jerry Leder, turning him down for the lead role in his TV development of The Warrior, later called Kung Fu. 2 days later, December the 9th, 1971, Bruce filmed his only released English-language interview with Canadian broadcaster Pierre Berton. Berton showed tremendous foresight in traveling to Hong Kong to interview the as yet unknown in the West, Bruce Lee. Bruce's demeanor and eloquence throughout the interview were both impressive and riveting. In December 1971, Bruce sold his property in the United States for $57,000, having originally paid $47,000 for it. He permanently relocated his family to Hong Kong, enabling work to begin on his second contracted movie for Golden Harvest, Fist of Fury. The rest, as they say, is stuff of legend.